We're bringing the week into a screeching halt here as we end mental health, what we're calling Mental Health Week. Welcome to Winning Begins at Home. I'm Randy Gravitt. Glad you're with us today as we land this conversation. I'm just trying to give you some things this week to think about to maybe help you in the areas that you can control. I said yesterday at the end, there's some things that you really probably do need some help with beyond the show here, what we talked about this week. But I think sometimes it can be as simple as having the right attitude and doing the right thing and working hard and how we treat people and all those kind of things. We talked about the difference in failure and fragile this week. That was an interesting conversation. And then doable hard versus destructive hard. And then yesterday we sort of started toward the end of the week with Martin Seligman's concept from Learned Optimism, where he talks about if something happens to you, that it's so easy to make it personal, or to believe that it's going to be permanent, or that we allow it to affect every area of our lives. He calls that pervasive. It's just like, there's something happens here, I let it affect every area. I think there is some truth to all that stuff he's talking about. And again, we're not. I said yesterday, I'm not a psychologist here, but I do believe there's some things that affect our mental, and we could even put emotional health in there. We've kind of labeled that as stress and anxiety and depression, maybe, and some of it is clinical, but some of it is controllable. And what I mean by that is, I want you to think about a couple of more concepts today. I heard somebody say one time that your direction always determines your destination. And I think there's so much truth to that. It's the things that we're doing, the habits that we have, the patterns in our life, the attitudes, all those things lead so much to what's going on in our lives. I mean, we end up where we are because of the choices we make a lot of times. But one of the choices we make is who we hang out with. And I got a buddy who always used to tell me that your friends determine the quality and direction of your life. Well, I heard somebody say this last week, that the people you run with always determine the direction you run. And I thought that was such a good reminder. It's the same thing basically. It's this idea that if we are at a point where we're struggling, there's a good chance that the people around you are contributing to that in some way, shape, or form. And if you don't have positive people around your life, I think it's hard to go to a positive place. If you're surrounded by negative people, it'll be really hard to go to a positive place. And so I said a few days ago, you probably can't end all those relationships, especially if they're the ones that live with you in your home. This is Winning Begins at Home. But I want to remind you that you do have permission to sit down and have a conversation, and it may take multiple conversations, and you may need an outside party to help you, coach you, counsel you to get where you need to go. But I just want to just challenge you to let's not settle for less than what's optimal here. I think so many times we get in a situation, and maybe in those relationships, those conversations that we have, or maybe the lack of conversations, we might say that we're not communicating, especially if we're at a bad place in those relationships. I think it's so easy to make that, pervasive and permanent and personal, like we talked about yesterday. But so much of it really goes back to, am I doing what I need to do to make sure that we get to where we need to go? And if I'm not careful, if I'm at a bad place myself, if I'm at a depressed or anxious or stressed out place, that's gonna spill over and even become toxic on the people around me. But chances are some of that is coming because I've got the wrong people in my circle. Maybe I'm running with the wrong people. I love that reminder. I heard this again this last week. The people that you run with determine the direction you run. It's so simple, but it's so true. And I remember back, my mom's always like, the people you hang out with, that's going to, it's the old, if your friends jumped off a bridge, would you? And I'm like, I probably would have, but I think there's so much truth to that. It's if we're not careful, we will allow the people around us to really affect us in negative ways. And so maybe for some of you, especially some of our relationships that are not those permanent relationships, those, again, we need to work on those and change those. But if we've got people that are bringing on destructive habits and patterns of thinking and behavior, addictive behavior, some of those relationships may need to end. And so, I really do think that the people you hang out with, they do affect the quality of your life, the direction of your life. This is a huge thing. And so, obviously, a kind of a weird way to end this week of what we've called mental and emotional health. But I want to just remind you, the people that you hang out with, they got a lot to do with who you are. There's an old study I read a few years ago. It said that your life is going to be the average of the 5 people closest to you, which always kind of scared me because I had 4 daughters and my wife, and it's kind of dangerous for these 5 women that I was living with at the time. But it's so true that when you get close to think about the people you hang out with outside of work and maybe even outside of your family, those people that you are closest to, I'm guessing you dress like they dress and you talk like they talk and you go to the same places and you eat at the same, restaurants, and you have maybe the same hobbies. There's a really good chance that you are very much like those people. In fact, I heard in this same study, it said that you can take the basically the annual salary of those people that you hang out with, or your 5 closest friends, and you could add it all together and divide by 5, and your salary will be somewhere about $10,000, either plus or minus of the average of those people. So maybe if you need more money, you need to hang out with people with more money. I don't know, is kind of what I got from that, but I think there's so much truth to it that if we are not careful, we're going to be shaped in our attitudes and our actions and our values of the people that we hang out with. And so I would just encourage you today to really give some thought to what's going on in your life. And if there are areas that are not, again, they're negative, I guess is just a good way to say it. They're stressful. There's that anxiety and even depression that's going on, or maybe you've become cynical or skeptical, any of that stuff. If that's all true, there's a good chance that there's some people around you with those same attitudes, and we kind of feed off of each other, right? Well, let's don't do that. Let's make sure that we do everything we can. Let's control what we can control. We'll go back to where we started at the beginning of the week. We can control our attitude. We can control how hard we work. We can control how we treat people. And I think we can control who those people are. So I want to just encourage you to make sure that you're surrounded by people that are life-giving, and you're giving them life. They're giving you life. I think your life can be a lot better if you'll do that. All right. Love you guys. Thanks for being a part of the Winning Begins at Home family here. I hope you'll continue to share this content with your friends and family. Continue to push it out. Help us grow this thing. And we'll be back next week with all new stuff. All right. See you next week.